Cody, man, what's happening?
How's it going, man? It's great to chat
Hey,
with you. It's been a couple months, huh?
yeah, we're supposed to be doing Marketing Masters Zoom call once a month, but I think we've all gotten crazy busy. And I was on with
It's,
Michael the other night for like an hour. But yeah, it seems like I just talked to you yesterday.
I know. I feel it's growing.
Yeah,
It goes so quick.
it's going crazy. But for
Oh,
listeners, real quick, Cody is a master B2B digital marketer. This guy believes that distribution is more important than product, which we're going to unfold and talk about. And you've done some really incredible things in your career. I think the one that stood out, I mean, you can go through a little bit for background for the audience, but you took Rupa Health like 6x their valuation and not a lot of time. And you've basically started ramping up companies, which we'll talk about, from Swell to Drafthorse to your podcast agency, which you now are automating basically. But and just always trying new stuff. And I think you shit post more than anybody I know on Twitter, but it apparently is working. So I think
it,
maybe you could talk about that
it's so
strategy.
ridiculous. I hate it, honestly. Like I don't want to be there. Like people have said it comes off like in the tone that I have on it. Like I don't want to be there, but it's working and my companies are growing. So I'm like, I have to do it
Well, let's dive into that in a minute. Can you just give a little bit of your back? You've been doing B2B marketing for over
Yeah,
10 years
yeah.
now.
So I started at a B2B marketing agency. My background was actually in e-commerce originally. I was like early, this was the probably 2011, 2010. I started selling stuff on the internet. I was like everybody. I was like, how do you sell things? How do you make money online? Like everybody from my generation. And so fast forward, I ended up getting a job working for a B2B marketing agency. The owner of that company, who's like, mentor and basically has guided me career wise. He went through YC. He did that whole thing. And then he kind of came back after he saw the light and he's like, let's just do this for big corporate companies that have no idea what they're doing. And so my role there was really like digital strategy. So we come in, we talk, and we worked with a lot of manufacturing companies. So imagine like wood manufacturers or windows or showers or, whatever.
Everyday stuff.
Yeah, totally. But like, I mean, we're talking huge orgs with market caps that are, in the billions. And so anyways, my job was to be, he always said it was the young, crazy person that they would bring into the room to like throw the wild ideas out so that they could get them to actually do like the ones that that are like still
Basic.
a stretch for them. Yeah, exactly. So I worked there and really kind of cut my teeth. And fast forward, I ended up at a Rupa Health. So my friend was working there. He got hired as the head of growth, and he basically was like, come help me do this. We had worked together in the past. And he's like, I need somebody basically to build out like all of our marketing processes and team and kind of just 0 to 1 this whole thing. And so a lot of his time was being spent on like partnership negotiation. Like it was a lot of like partner distribution for the growth. And so my role was really like everything else from SEO to paid ads to, you name it. I probably touched it. One of my things I did there was spin up their podcast as well. And we took it from non-existent to a top 20 medical podcast in about 6 months. It was doing, I think, around 180,000 downloads or around there when I ended up leaving, which was
A
a year
month.
later. So a month, yeah.
So
Um,
can we stop there for a minute? Can you
yeah,
talk about like what was the secret to do that? Because a lot of people who are probably listening may or may not have a podcast, but getting that type of growth in that short amount of time is super hard.
totally. Yeah. So on the podcast side, there's 3 things that we found to work, and I had no idea about podcasting. Like my this is what I'm good at, and I always joke that like I'm really good at puzzles, and then as soon as I figure them out, I don't want to do them anymore, and so that's like why like build documentation and hand them off to teams so that they can ship on it. But so what we ended up figuring out was basically how to gain podcast downloads and how to rise in charts, which then created the snowball effect. So the strategies there were 3 things. Our goal was we wanted to be a top 100 medical podcast, and by the end of the year,
In the
and
Apple charts, just for
in the Apple
everybody.
charts, yeah, in the Apple charts, yeah. So the strategies we used were podcast SEO. We used Facebook ads to iOS only devices, and I'll break each of these down in a second. And then the other thing we paired with that was newsletters in the form of emails. I'm now starting to see people do newsletters in the form of SMS messages as well, and we're getting way better results. But I'll talk through each of those kind of
Yeah.
depth real quick. So the podcast SEO, what we ended up seeing is that basically like people are using Spotify and the Apple podcasting app is as a search engine, but it's the most basic search engine that's ever existed. So if you just include target keyword phrases that are relevant to your brand, you're going to start showing up. And so what we ended up doing was naming the podcast and like putting into the description all of these things that we knew were related to the brand. So they were focused on functional medicine. That's what they it's basically like chronic disease management is what it comes down to. Like you go and you have eczema that's like you can't get rid of. You end up doing dietary changes and get that fixed. And so Rupa is a specialty lab test marketplace. So imagine all the specialty lab test companies, they aggregate them into a single portal. You come in, and as a practitioner, you can order, from these 5 different companies for a single patient. So the strategy with the podcast was like we were trying to go as wide as possible, not just practitioners. We were wanting to hit everybody that had an interest in this category, because our view was like, if we can get everybody, we're also going to get physicians within that. And then it creates this dialogue and we can get this word of mouth effect to happen. So also we found that practitioners like fame. And so the more you like downloads, you can tell them that you're getting at like 2 patients, which creates this inbound for them. It was just all the incentives were aligned. So anyway, so we did the podcast SEO piece, again, naming and really what the factors of SEO on podcasts are you getting downloads, number one? And then are the keyword phrases in either the title of the podcast show name, in the podcast description, in the podcast episode titles, or in the podcast episode show notes. And so we had all of these, target keyword phrases that we were trying to come up for, and we would include those in all that.
Do you think can we stop there for a second?
Yeah, please.
You think that, so I've been experimenting with that and as an SEO person, and it does seem like we're back in 1998. That dates me a little bit, but it actually is. I don't say that easy, and people make a lot of mistakes there. But do you think that they are aggregating the algorithm like YouTube in some sense, whereas if you're around one topic, you get more juice and it looks at it, or you look at individual? Because I've been experimenting, Cody, and I get mixed results. So my one podcast, which the Brandon White Show, which part of this is going to definitely be on, it has so many different topics, as you know. I mean, we've gone from how to run an escort service to a A10 pilot, right? Like, right. And a Delta Force guy chasing child traffickers, to how to reach your peak performance with good health. So, and what I'm seeing there is if I do keyword it, those episodes they'll find those episodes. In a marketing podcast, which this is going to be on, I just called it marketing. That's the name of the podcast. Crazy. And then I'm seeing actually more downloads, but it could be because people are finding that individual episode and then subscribing because the rest of the episodes are like that. So it's hard for me to track what that is. Do you have any insight around that?
Yeah. So like the brands that I work with, a lot of the times they're in a specific category, like working with a biotech company right now. And so like for them, it's like everything is biotech. And so like the subscriber rates are crazy, like, and so I always try to say like most people are serving a specific industry. And so it's like all the content that you're making is to service that industry and to entertain that industry and to create, I call it digital gravity. Everybody like talks about funnels, and like how I think about the internet is like, I'm trying to make digital mass online so that I create more gravity and influence within my niche. And so content is the way that we make digital mass. And what's the byproduct of digital mass? Digital gravity. And that's basically how you get, like, I like to frame it and think about it personally.
I like that.
So I think, when you look at like a Joe Rogan, right? Like they're there for him as much as they're there for the guest. And so like from a subscriber standpoint, like he's just built so much trust over time. So when it's like a personal show where you're talking to like all these like super interesting people, they're there for you as much as they are for the guest. When it's about a specific topic, a lot of the times, like they're there for the guest's information. So again, you was talking about this biotech company, like one that we're doing. So for them, they are like bringing on, biotech founders that have done this multiple times. And all the people that are listening to the podcast want to be biotech founders. And so it's just like this very consistent thing. So I will say that we've seen, like, for example, if you search biotech right now, or specifically biotech startups, that keyword phrase, you'll see a podcast that's in the search results, and it's like dominating every episode that comes up in the results on Apple Podcasts. And so it's going to become very apparent for them. They're like, oh, this company is really focused on biotech startups. Maybe I should listen to the podcast. It creates inbound. We get subscribers from that.
And that's
you have that snowball effect.
sorry, I'm asking all these
No, it's great.
specific questions, but that's just using Apple Podcasts. You're not building a separate site for the podcast, are you at all?
Nope. This is what I'm talking about here is just within
Apple. So
just
that Apple link comes up in Google. They click on it. They go to that static HTML page, and then it basically rolls out to
and it's not even Google. Like we're seeing these searches happen. Like nobody actually has the search volume data because it's like Apple, it's locked down, and Spotify, it's locked down. But like we're seeing inbound happen where like they're going to Apple Podcasts, they search biotech news or whatever. And then they just like discover the podcast that way. So again, when we're talking about like it's early SEO, like it feels, I've been doing this for 10 plus years. It feels like those moments where you're like, oh my God, I'm getting 1 cent link clicks on Facebook, or like I'm getting like half-cent link clicks on TikTok or whatever, right? Like these arbitrages, moments of arbitrage exist, marketing arbitrages exist, and you have a small window to capitalize on it. This is one of those that I'm seeing. Anyway, with that.
Yeah. So that's with the SEO. And I appreciate it. And one comment on, and I've been torn, Cody, recently, because if you read the podcast newsletters, the industry newsletters, they start to say like Spotify owns a lot of the market, blah, blah, blah. But then I'm using Buzzsprout as hosting. I do use some stuff on Lisbon from back in the day. But Buzzsprout does publish a aggregate numbers. And my numbers are coming from Apple devices. And I mean, like 80% of all the podcasts in our network are coming from Apple. But then I see people talking about Spotify, and I wonder if that's Spotify marketing, trying to press that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we were just at an industry conference, and 100% Spotify's going to win. They're just thinking about
They're going to win in podcasts?
They're going to win podcasting, in my opinion, just based on how they're thinking about it, how they're approaching it, the investments they're making, the technology they're building. They are not there yet whatsoever. Like I'm talking
that's where I was
10 years.
Like, am I screwing this up? Because I don't feel like the SEO in Spotify works the same as Apple.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's definitely on the Apple side.
What is different in Spotify?
The reason I point to Apple is because we see the same in our data, right?
Okay.
Majority of podcast downloads coming from Apple Podcasts. Yeah, there are some coming from Spotify, and 90% of downloads are happening from Spotify or Apple. Like that's what it is. But like our whole strategy is, so if you go search right now, for example, like best marketing podcast USA, right? It's going to bring up Chartable, and Chartable is, it gives you podcast rankings, like the charts. Where are those charts coming from? They're coming from apple.com, the podcast category marketing. There's literally like 300 podcasts that are the most popular marketing podcasts, right? So Chartable and every other site like that, they're all pulling that data from Apple. Like that's the only place that it can come from. There's no public, it's not like this data is anywhere else. So the idea and like what we're tapping into when we only promote Apple Podcast downloads with all of our strategies, like the newsletter, the Facebook stuff I'm about to talk about. The reason for that is because if you can get yourself to show up in the top 300 of a podcast category, all of these websites scrape those categories and you get proliferation to all these websites. So it's this knock-on effect that happens. So it's like, okay, you hit a top category, boom, suddenly you're just like, you see downloads spike, right? And so when you're starting like 0 to 1, so again, like a biotech podcast, like they have no downloads. What do? You basically like juice downloads to get into a top like category. As soon as you hit that top category, you see this like another tick that like, you see that jump happen again. And then you just basically like continue to ride that wave. So hopefully that makes sense. Happy to dive deeper, but.
Well, it makes complete sense. And Cody, it explains something that I have not been able to figure it out. So I'm just going to take the Brandon. I actually see this with every podcast in our network. There'll be a point where, and I used to attribute it to posting it on Twitter, which maybe we can comment, but I do believe that helps and it gets you in Google search and et cetera, but it does not explain how we get 2,000 downloads one day and 30 the next. And I think what you just explained may be what happening is somehow, I mean, we're always in the top of the charts across the world. I always want to be in the United States. So sometimes we hit that, sometimes we don't. It's pretty regular, but not consistent, let's say. But there'll be days, Cody, where this thing just spikes and then it spikes again and then it spikes again. And it feels like from what you explained, that means that we are hitting the top of the charts, we're getting scraped, and then we're getting this boost. It's like this flywheel. And do you think
Exactly.
that that's basically because there's no
Exactly.
way you go from 2,000 downloads, like it'll be 2,000, 1,700, 300, 700, and then one day 30. Like it makes no sense whatsoever.
Totally. So I mean, I could talk
Yeah.
about this for probably an hour and a half. So
Oh, well,
cut me off at any
not,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think this is important
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Most downloads, like 80% of downloads that happen in a week, happen on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So like what we do is every Tuesday morning, the podcast goes live. And then every Wednesday morning, a newsletter goes out promoting that podcast episode. So the natural seasonality that's occurring on a weekly basis, we're trying to ride that wave every week for the people that we're working with. The reason for that is, again, like as you spike within these charts, and we see this, like we watch the charts, right? It's like Monday rolls around and the client is at position 59. And Tuesday, the podcast drops and the client jumps to position 24, right? And Wednesday, the email drops and the client jumps to position, 14. And so what we're doing there is like, what happens in that whole process is like, as you get more downloads as well, that is the only metric that we've been able to like relate to us getting just organic like happening on the Apple podcasting app, on Spotify, etc. And so like our view is that, okay, when we do that whole Tuesday, Wednesday sequence, the knock-on effect that's happening in the background that is untrackable as well, like because podcasts are built on RSS feeds, nobody knows actually what's going on. This technology is like it's like a potato, right? It's like it's not it's ridiculous. And so the thing with this is that we're basically trying to get those rise in the charts because we know we're going to get more organic reach within the search engine of the applications. So that's our philosophy. That's what we've seen work. I have no concrete data to support this. All we know is that our podcast continue to grow by doing this, and so we're doing it. So that's kind of our view. So
what's the difference in Spotify? I've actually talked to Spotify's customer support. To be honest with you, is pretty extraordinary.
Totally, and that's why I'm saying that I think they'll win, right? Because like they're like, okay, so they basically at this summit, what they said is that they're starting to transcribe everything and they're indexing all the keywords. And soon, within the next couple of years, you're going to be able to buy ad space based on the conversations that are happening within the podcast episodes. So as a marketer, I'm like, hell yeah. They talk about XYZ keyword that's super valuable to my business. I want to put an audio ad in there that's an insert. Oh, you're telling me that the audio ad can clone the voice of the host? Right. So it's like it's an ad read happening from the host, but AI is doing that ad read. Like this is all the things that they're saying. I don't see Apple talking about it in that way whatsoever. So like to me, it's like who's going to win? Like Spotify. So that's when I say that those are the things that like the supporting arguments towards it. We'll see what actually happens, but yeah.
Well, currently, I actually had to write to them because I said, hey, look, we're not even, I forget which podcast it was to be completely honest, but I was like, hey, we're not even coming up. And it is very clear that our keyword, this thing's SEO to the high hill here. And then they actually had to recategorize us into another category, but it doesn't seem like I don't know whether they're like doing a SQL search, like this basic SQL search that they're doing, but it does not seem to work the same way as Apple. Like, I don't know
We've
if
seen the same.
You
like
are.
we've seen movements in Apple and like the same percentage growth will happen in the Spotify plays as well. But like we'll move up in position in Apple for target keywords, and then within Spotify we just stay in the same location. So it just doesn't feel. Yeah, I don't have a good answer.
Yeah,
it's like kind of one of those like black box things. But
I also wonder if the audiences are the same. Like, are people going to Spotify for more music right now? And Joe Rogan, who you can only get there, right? I mean, are they really going there for that right now? Whereas Apple Podcasts is back to this niche thing. It's podcasts. I mean, Apple Music is separate. Spotify is sort of all in the same app.
Yeah, I think that probably is a component of it. I think that the demographics are just way different too. Like if you look at somebody that has an iOS device, right? Like they're typically in a higher demographic like category. And again, I'm just saying like
No,
purely
right.
just
In general, this is marketing, man. This isn't.
exactly. And so if you're thinking, okay, every iOS device has an Apple podcasting on it, like, and we're talking about business related things or investing or whatever, like marketing, all of these things that are like in some way related to making money. And
B2B.
yeah. So anyway, I wish I had insight on this. I have no idea. This is one of those things where it's like, I've just had to come to terms. It's like B2B attribution, you know, it's like, I know that things are happening. There's touch points going on. I could spend a ton of money to try to figure out what is actually going on, but it probably just makes more sense to like look at it in the aggregate. Like, is blended CAC decreasing? Yes. Okay, cool. I'm then it's all right. The company is all right. The health of the company is all right. So
I think that's a good way to talk about it. And I think this rabbit hole is worth it. We're talking about your experience at Rupa Health and the podcast, which you said you took from 0 to like 180,000 downloads. So you have three things. We've just covered SEO.
yep.
What is your second tactic that you were
Yeah,
using
so the
there?
second tactic we used, so once we knew that we could get ourselves to rank, or like this is how it kind of functions, then we were like, how do we get our initial downloads so that we can get into these charts? Because again, we can basically game those charts. So what we ended up doing is running iOS only Facebook ads to people with an interest in our category, which again was functional medicine. And we sent them directly to the Apple Podcast episode link. So not the show link, but directly to the Apple Podcast episode link. So that Apple Podcast episode link on an iOS device is technically a deep link. So when you click that Facebook ad, and the Facebook ad was straight up just like a clip that like from the show, right? Like just like we're going to do with this, like you're going to chop this up.
Well, I do want to ask a specific question here because you and I were talking about this a while ago and I started to experiment, of course. And is that link the web page link, or do you have to get that link from the Apple Podcast app itself? Because I think they're different.
I've used it with a web page link. I always like test this like before I,
right, of
start
course,
putting ad spend behind it. So I'll do like a preview ad, click it on a mobile, make sure that flow goes. But the whole process basically is like you find that episode URL. I just pull it from desktop because that's what ends up working. We drop that in. Again, the clip, it's like a clip from the episode. We just find the most viral hook parts of the episode. We'll do 10 different variations of it. We will run all of those different variations against each other. Whichever one has the lowest CPC, that's where all of the ad spend goes. And when the user clicks, so say they're on Instagram and they see this ad and they click the ad, it prompts them immediately after to open the Apple Podcasting app. They open the Apple Podcasting app. The play button is right there. They hit play. They start the podcast. That's a download. So we were like, okay, we figured this out. And we're like, let's spend 10 grand in 14 days and see what happens. Right. So we did that and we're like, oh, we just got, it was something ridiculous, like 20,000 downloads or something like that. And like, we're like, okay, so that worked. What happens if we do 50 grand in a month? Right. And so we did that. And so that kind of got us our initial, like how we were thinking about is like, we're going to get this initial bump. That's going to help us with the SEO component. And then we're going to layer on a newsletter on top of this. But the newsletter, we're going to like gray hat growth this thing, which is going to take time. And so this was like the interim solution so that we could kind of like, we get that initial lift, we get our initial subscribers. Those subscribers, every time a new episode is published, it turns into an immediate download so that you have a higher baseline, right? So like every time you do an episode, it's like boom, 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 boom. You see that jump. It's just like continues up. So that was our strategy. We ended up turning off ads entirely like later on. And because it got to a size where it was like, it could live in some, it could fuel its own growth just by how big it was. Right. And so you're almost just trying to get to that critical mass. And at that moment, then it's like, cool, we rolled back all the ad spends. We actually did this right before the raise. And so it's like overnight, everything looks way less. Right. So that you're like prepping for that, like your P&L looks really good. And then you go and you'd be like, hey, we can turn this off at any point and become profitable. And that's, kind of the whole strategy. Right. So anyways, I mean, we won't talk funding stuff and how to, think about investors. And
that's a whole nother topic, which we can talk about in another episode, but maybe not right now. But so that's the second prong of the 3-prong approach on how to how you launch this podcast.
Yep. And then the other piece of it is then building a newsletter. So what we did is we scraped everybody in our target audience, all of their emails. And we validated all those emails. And then we started just cold emailing them from the newsletter. We do 200 a day, adding them to the newsletter with the most viral podcast episode that we had. And it was like literally the email, Brandon, like it's like podcast, like the name of the episode. And then it's like the first line of the email is like, hey, name, like the newest episode of the Root Cause Medicine podcast is live. Click the link. Gives you details of what the show is going to be about. And again, if I can add 200 a day and I do that every day for, that's 5,000 a month. So at the end of 6 months, no public math. So I'm going to actually do it. I mean, you have an email list of 30,000 people. The crazy part of this is a cold list that we were seeing 35 to 40% open rates on with like 4 to 6% CTRs. Like I could not get cold email. I could never get it to do that. But I'm emailing them a podcast, which feels like not marketing yet. Like people haven't like they haven't come to that in their mind yet. It's not like saturated. And so, because it is still a heavy lift, right? Like when you think about all the production that goes on in the background, it's like, okay, I have to get good guests. The content has to be awesome. We have to edit it. We have to distribute. Like there's actually a bunch of lift. And so that's probably why it's just a hard thing to do. So with that, again, we would see these insane open rates, these insane clicks. And so we could basically just like drive, massive amounts of traffic to every time this episode dropped. And the other component of this is we started to see it getting forwarded, right? So it's like we drop it in the list that like we'd hit everybody in this audience, and then they would forward it to their colleagues, and that would create this like inbound loop. So what this ended up evolving into, I don't even know what it is at now. I'm guessing, just knowing like my friends there, like I'm guessing it's in the range of 250,000, plus of like of a list that's emailing this podcast. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm guessing it's in that kind of size. And like, that's how we were thinking about, because like our thesis was owned media, right? Like we wanted to have own distribution, like long-term. Cause like I was I've been saying this for the last 5 years. And now everybody's talking about this as well. Like the future, like you're not a product company that makes like media. You're a media company that makes product. Like flip that mindset. And we're seeing that for the first time, I think, with like all of these creators like coming out, and they're like, yeah, they build these like personal brands, and then they launch, I mean, Sam Parr is a great example, like builds his personal brand, launches Hampton. It goes crazy. Like we're seeing the same thing happen over and over and over again. And so it's this whole new world when it comes to, I think from founders need to have their own media channels. I can talk about that. I think the Twitter piece, we can go deeper on that whole idea, but that was straight up why I'm doing all this Twitter stuff and, just
well, I'll be honest with you. I'm a little bit older than everybody here, but I mean, I got started in 1996, and I learned that lesson that you just described with that podcast, the third part of that prong of launching that podcast very early on. The difference was that my wife and I would go into AOL chat rooms, specific niches. At that time it was fishing. We would write the handles down. We would, on a legal pad, a yellow legal pad, 3 columns. The next day, I would put them in individual emails, because we didn't even have email list senders back then. And I would put fishing reports on there. Hey, X, I would, here's some fishing reports. And now people would say, you could say, and eventually people abused this, and like in 1998, 99, really 99, 2000, 2001 is when the spammers basically really figured this all out. But Cody, I would email them and they would write back, oh my God, thank you so much for this information, because it's so targeted.
Yes.
And the other thing that people would say to me is, well, Brandon, that's not scalable. Well, I got news for you, folks. In the beginning, you have to do personalized things.
100%.
Right? Like, and now we have these cold emailers that work. I just ran a cold email campaign that had a 50% open rate, and the click-through rate, I forget what it was, mainly because it's very targeted. And I don't mean to say, I feel like, Cody, we go through these evolutions on the internet, really having been there and I worked at America Online in the early years, and I don't see anything radically different. I see people figuring out that if you have an audience and an email list specifically, that you can launch things. But I think that the hard part, and maybe you can comment on this, it's not getting this information, because the listeners listening right now are probably ready to go do this, right? Because you and I are showing that you can do this successfully. It's actually the consistency.
100%.
Because it is 100% hard to write the email that I write every week to my list, because it takes 3 or 4 hours, and someone would say, well, no one reads long emails. Yes, they do if they trust you.
100%.
Right.
And if they're like, I mean, I just think about these companies. Like, again, I come from a B2B world, right? Like, they're like, nobody wants to, like, you talk to the average person, they're like, nobody wants to read about an engineered word specs, you know? And I'm like, cool. Well, I know 20,000 people that will easily have their company pay 10 grand a year to like learn about engineered wood specs and what's happening in the industry. Like, how do you think industry publications exist? Like, that is the whole reason, you know? So anyway,
well, you
I
have
think,
to deliver value. I do want to say this,
of
and
course,
you can,
of course, I'm not talking spam. I'm talking like very,
yeah, too many people out there. There's all these marketers. That's sort of weird, you and I saying that, but out there saying, just put out some like Seinfeld. There's like
like
Seinfeld
memes,
emails.
man.
Yeah,
The lowest like I'm talking the scum of the earth is marketers that just only lean on memes that aren't relevant to their audience. Like, it's like that drives me insane. I just feel so like you're not doing any. I don't know. That's not how you build brand. Like, that's how I think about it. Like, more and more too, I'm just like, marketing is just education in disguise. You know, like, I'm just like, I'm actually an educator. Like, I'm like, okay, here's these things I'm learning. I'm going to package it in a way, and then I'm going to intertwine something in here so that I can continue to like do this, like learning and then re-educating. Like, that's actually what. So anyway, one thing I wanted to comment on before we move on to is that, like, you're right. Your comment that, like, hey, it's all the same. It's just like, it just changes a little bit. Like, right? Like, oh, email was the arbitrage. Well, I think that what it is like things they're novel, and then one day they're not novel, right? Because you get a ton of spam, and at that moment, then that arbitrage has evaporated. I just talked to my friend, actually. He was the head of growth at Deliveroo and then Depop, and now he's working at a new company. His deep T is in like iOS apps, right? Like, he's good at growing iOS apps. And so for him, he's like, my whole career is actually the same exact thing. At Deliveroo, it was Facebook ads to get app downloads. At Depop, it was Snapchat ads to get app downloads. And now at Nude, his current company that he's working at, it's TikTok ads to get app downloads. Like, nothing has changed. It's just the channel, because that's where the arbitrage exists. And like, that is the job of a marketer. Like, you're trying to identify wherever that is. You be there until it's not. And I always think about it as like, I have one going out the door, I have one I'm doing constantly, and I have one I'm experimenting with. And like, I have that next one in the like the funnel lineup. I actually learned that from a contractor. He told me that. He's like, when I do jobs, he's like, I always have one I'm completing, one I'm working on, and one that I'm like, I'm speccing. And it's like, okay, cool. Just take that learning and apply that to the same industry. Or to another industry.
I think that's it. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes, I did a government services company in between, and I stopped my email list. At the time, I think my email list was 75,000. And now we're down, like, depends on what you count. My full list is like 24,000 plus, maybe 30,000 if you have some other cohorts. But it's just a math equation, right? I mean, if you can keep that consistency and keep that audience, and you can have high open rates, which is a whole nother topic about not gaming, but getting Google to put your email in the right section, right, to get it to be open. But if you can do that, you really can launch anything. Now, you're going to have a wide audience, so you're going to have to segment that, but you're going to basically get the flywheel started, I think.
100%. I mean, we just did this with Twitter, right? Like, we launched this new company, Drafthorse, and in the first 30 days, it grew as fast as it took Swell like 9 months to grow, right? Like, the only reason we could do that is because we had an owned media channel. And that's what I'm talking about. It's like, it's just a no-brainer. Like, of course everybody should be doing this. And they talk like, it's different than a personal brand too. Like, people are like, oh, build a personal brand. No, like, do cool things and talk about them in public, and people will just want to like be they will just be gravitated to that. Like, that's all. Like, people are like, oh, how do you do this? And I'm like, literally, like, do things you think are interesting, talk about them because you think they're interesting, and then other people that are interested in that thing will find you, and suddenly, oh, cool, you have an audience. And I put, again, a new software platform that we built on top, like, in front of that audience, and they're like, oh, I trust this person. I have interacted with them for months, And now they have this thing that services me because they've been talking about something that I've been interested in. Give me, take my money. That's what it turns into. So that, I don't know. It's not complicated. To your point, it's hard. Like, it's just really hard. Like, I write 70 tweets a week. I sit down on Sundays and I drink whiskey and I write 70 tweets. And I do
Sometimes
that
I can tell how far down the glass you are, Cody.
Exactly. Like, people will say that. They're like, "Oh, this one is a deep in a bottle of wine tweet," Like, that's what it ends up being. And so anyway, but
it definitely works. And I 100% agree with you. One of the mistakes that I made, Cody, was I tried to write what I thought people wanted. And as soon as I started, I was like, how would I describe my newsletter? I'll tell you how I describe my newsletter. I write about things I know. I've had 2 exits, 20 strikeouts. I've been married for 27 years. I wrote an Amazon #1 best-selling book. What else? I ride bikes all the time. I've been extreme athlete, and like, that's what I write about. If you're interested in any of that stuff, and I think one point that's really important to the point that you made here for listeners is, even if your audience isn't a customer of Drafthorse, which we're going to talk about after we get past Rupa Health here, is they will tell someone they know who they think will be interested in it, because you've broken the barrier of trust. So now you're going to get a word of mouth. So it's not always, there's too many D2C or whatever these marketers call themselves out there saying, oh, it's got to convert. Like, that's a mentality of, let's do the next campaign. I want to be in the mentality of, let's look at this for the long term and see what that long-term play is, because the flips and all of that stuff mostly are lies and generally don't happen. I'm not 100%. Saying that
it's short-term revenue or it's long-term assets. That's all it is. Like, what is brand, right? Like, this is they're like, what is brand? Like, well, brand to me is like, are people searching directly for my company's name? Yes. Is it going up to the right? Yes. Okay. Like, can I sell that in the future? Yes. Like, now contrast that with a drop shipper that's just hawking some terrible product. Okay. Are they making money? Yes. Are the people searching for the brand? Probably not. Very rare does it happen. Can they sell that company because people are looking for it? Probably not. So to me, it's just like, I mean, if we're talking about longevity and like building wealth or whatever you want to call it, like it's that is one of the most like basic things that you have to start from. And then all of your decisions happen from that. Does this serve the brand long term? Yes. Does it make us survive short term? Yes. Okay, cool. If the answer is yes to both of those things, 100% do that at all costs, whatever it takes. If it's either of those things or no, it's probably not the right thing to do. Just build the matrix, and then just like look at that matrix and measure each of those decisions out. I used to tell that to our team. Like, I would just be like, okay, like this is how we think about this. This is that framework to think about this. Like, is it building the brand long-term, and is it short-term making us revenue so that we can survive? Yes. If it's yes that every time for whatever decision you're making, don't ask me. Don't just do the thing. If you think it's right, like, take that into your own hands. So,
no, I think you're right. I learned that with that first website that I sold, the sport fishing website, was that I knew that if we built a brand, that it would be very hard for a competitor to come in and knock us off. And eventually someone was going to want to roll up our niche, was the Mid-Atlantic United States, into a bigger play. And it was going to be a buy versus build decision. And I wasn't building to sell. I think that, and you said that in a different way, but some people say like, or people raise money and all this stuff. They're like, well, who are you going to sell it to? And they're building it to sell it. Here's my story. And I know this is yours. Build something that's worth something, that solves a real problem, that builds a brand, and you won't have to sell it or look for someone. They come looking for you because they need or want that thing that they can't build them. It's a build versus buy decision. And I think what happened for me is that I leveraged my personal brand. I built the bigger brand. That brand, to your point, started getting searches. And we had $550,000 worth of free SEO traffic coming to that site every month. I didn't spend any marketing money. So how are you going to compete with that, even if you wanted to try to build it. And at the end of the day, it worked. Now, did it happen overnight, Cody? No, like that's a longer story, right? But it did happen. And that's why. And I'm under NDA. I can't talk about it because I got a very, very high multiple for my brand because it was a brand. We had people wearing Titlefish t-shirts on boats driving around. Like once you see the merchandise, you're done. I mean, and people were
100%.
talking on the radio.
What is that? What is that saying? Is like if they get a tattoo of your brand, it's legit. Like you.
Yeah,
have
I don't think we ever
disciples.
got a tattoo, but they were talking about it on the VHF radio. They were wearing hats, they were wearing t-shirts, and it struck me one day. I can remember, and we're gonna go on to your next thing from Rupa Health. But what struck me, I think it's worth driving this point in that you made because I was fishing one time at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Channel, which is in the southern part of the Chesapeake Bay, and it has very big striped bass. It's not as much anymore, but still big ones in the fall. And we were out there fishing when it was a beautiful day in December down there. And I looked across the boats, Cody, and when the fish are aggregated, you'll have all these boats coming in on it because you cast and catch fish every cast. And I looked around and I saw like a handful of people wearing Titlefish t-shirts. And I was like,
I remember that was so surreal.
I mean, it was like, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
in that moment, you're like, oh, like I just built the thing, right? Like it's bigger than me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like way bigger than me, but you do start. And look, I think all brands do like founder stories behind it, brands without a founder story, but I think it goes individual, you build the brand. And to your point, 100% what you said.
People like brands with faces. Like, why is it Steve Jobs and Apple? Why is it Bill Gates and Microsoft? Like they want a face. Like it's very hard for us to like think about a brand like abstractly. Like if I think about Nike, right? It's like it's kind of this abstract thing. But like if I think about Apple, it's always related to Steve Jobs, and I literally see his face, right? And this is what everybody does. And so that's why the founder like can be such a magic like individual within startups. Like it's because they attach that brand to that individual. It is like a representation of themselves that they're basically putting out into the world that everybody gets to interact with. So one thing before we move on, I just want to add this because I think it's interesting and people will find it interesting. So we grew this podcast, right? And then
Rupa Health. This is when you were at Rupa Health.
We grew this podcast and our thesis was like, I wonder if we can make it so that it's not like, can we make the growth department be a revenue center rather than a cost center? And so we got this podcast big enough that we went and we sold ad space on this. And it totally subsidized the entire salaries or all the salaries of the entire growth department. And that's what I'm talking about with this own media. Like where this actually all originated from. I read this book forever ago. I still can't remember the name. I can't find it, but it was basically talking about like Red Bull and how they turned into a media company. And it was talking about this Aero Electronics and how they turned into a media company. And it was like moments in time where they switched. They had this like epiphany, like, we're going to make media and the media can like fund its own self. But through that funding, it's going to make us sell products. And for me, it was just like this, like, aha moment. I was like, how do I do that? Right. Like I want, and Rupa was the first company I got to be able to do that with. We actually, like, where I had the resources and the team and we could actually, and just the trust. Cause like when you tell that to somebody, like a lot of the times they're like, you're telling me you're going to get a podcast so big that you're going to be able to go sell ads for it and it's going to subsidize the cost of the entire growth department. Like bullshit. Like, no, there's no way. Right. But like that is an insane thing when you think about it. Then the company is literally growing for free. Like it's cost neutral. It's not a cost center anymore. And like traditionally marketing, what is it? It's a cost center. But when you have own media, suddenly it's not a cost center anymore. It's something entirely different. So anyway, just wanted to add that before we move on to the next
I
step.
think it's a good point, and it really can be the goal. Or you can also get a return from just advertising your own stuff, which ultimately you're trying to do. But offsetting that is absolutely incredible. And I actually didn't know that part of the story, so I'm grateful for you sharing that. Let's go back. You're at Rupa Health. You did this podcast that we just got stuck on for. No, we didn't really get stuck on. We dropped like a ton. You did a ton of gold nuggets for 35 minutes on how to get a podcast going when a lot of people do struggle with that. But podcasts are important for brands too. I just would end with that. Like if you're not running a podcast, in my mind, for any company, I do not care what it is. even if you're only dropping 2 episodes a month or something, I just think you're totally missing out on an SEO experience that is very hard to replicate. And those links actually can be worth stuff in your show notes. Would
It's
you
also
agree?
just a content engine, man. Like I talk to companies and they're like, we don't know how to do branded content. I'm like, have industry experts on for 30 minutes a week talking about their industry expert knowledge. And then you chop that up into all these different clips. You turn it into a blog post. You turn it into tweets. You turn it into LinkedIn messages. You turn your LinkedIn post. You turn it into Facebook posts. You turn it into email newsletter. Like, that's 2 hours of time. And then you just use AI to repurpose it. I mean, that's, everything that we're building is basically that. It's like content repurposing, or it's in some way related to content production. That's how I'm thinking about it. Especially for like small brands. Like I did this with this company there in the insurance space. They're like a CRM for insurance agents. And so great product. Nobody knows they exist. Super high switching costs, like hard to get people to change. And so we make a podcast. We get all their emails. They are like, we start emailing them the podcast episodes. It's knowledge about how to grow their business. Of course they listen. Of course they open the emails. We get them all in. What happens 6 months later? They're at a conference, and the founders of this company, this is a funded company. They're at a conference related to this insurance space that they're in. And all of these people are coming up to them. They're like, hey, I love your podcast. I just wanted to tell you that. People, they have no idea who they are. I mean, overnight you can build a brand, like how, like if you're a startup, it's like, it's crazy when they're like, I don't see the value. And I'm like, yo, you literally are going to know, everybody in the industry is going to know you exist in 12 months. That's what you can do with this. If you actually like ship on it and be consistent. And the byproduct of it, again, is I get so much content out of it because I just repurpose those episodes into my entire week's worth of content. I schedule 5 LinkedIn posts pulling out key takeaways. I schedule a blog post a week. I have the podcast episode. I have a newsletter I send out about the podcast with the educational components. Like all of that is just handled. So as a founder, it's like, it's not heavy lifting. That's like 3 hours of mental energy you're spending a week to do that. And then you hand it off to a VA to ship on the processes that you built all day long. I'll do that all day long. So anyway, just brain dumping in my views. I don't know if it's right. It's what works for me. So
somebody said something the other day on Twitter, Cody. They were actually talking about an MBA, but I think it's important here too. They said something like, "Oh, an MBA," and people crap on that. And I'm not saying you do or don't need it, but I did get one, and I have one. And all my answer was, "I'm not dumber for it." So if you put out all this, if you put out all this marketing content, it's not going to hurt you. And the other thing is, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it is going to take a minute. And I think people in today's world, especially with all these marketers who are selling courses and all this stuff, like, hey, Cody, you're going to get rich overnight. I grew these DTC brands to $500,000 in revenue. And my question is, like, what's the profit margin? I could grow something to $100 million in revenue and be losing money out the back door because we were spending money on ads that we didn't optimize, that people really didn't want. We have no word of mouth component. We have no SEO. So you agree with that?
100%. 100%. I mean, I don't know. I just like, to me, it's like, to your point, like, why wouldn't you be doing it? To say the MBA thing in a different way. Like, I've never read a book and got dumber, really.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, if doing marketing in any form is not going to make your business get like less big. It's never not going to do that. So anyway,
so let's go back there. There is, whatchamacallit, you're at Rupa Health. You do the podcast. We cover that. What happens next for you?
Yeah. So I was walking the line between going all in on my own companies and going and working for another like startup. And so I ended up going and working for another startup for like 4 months. It was a crypto company. They were doing a high yield savings account that was powered by DeFi. I thought, looking at the whole stack they were using, I trusted it, right? It was like M-Stable, and they were doing a non-custodial wallet so you could pull your funds out at any point. Super cool. I really like the founders too. They're brilliant. They're like just really smart people building in that space. So I came in, we were having like, it was doubling, tripling month over month, three months in a row. The Terra Luna collapse happened, and everybody thought that they were insulated. That was like using M-Stable. Nobody was insulated because all of these deals that were happening. So basically overnight, the business model evaporated. They've hard pivoted now, and they're in they're actually, it's really interesting. They're doing insurance for like big like token buys. So they basically they're like an insurance aggregator. And so they'll sell insurance policies. Like I'm trying to do some type of transaction within this space, and they basically are like the vehicle for it. So super cool where they ended up. And that was actually a component of the really cool pivot. It was built, that was a component of the entire like software stack that we had when we were doing the high yield savings account. And they were like, oh, this is actually really valuable. Let's just pull that piece out, and that will be our hard pivot, because there was no like infrastructural layer for that. Because we were basically like having insurance on the non-custodial wallets for our users, and that was like a part of the value add. So it was like, oh, if something happened to like your funds, you were basically insured, but you didn't have to worry about it. So, anyways, so that all happened. We did a retro. I was like, I wouldn't pay me anymore. I told the founder that we got on a call, and I was like, you don't have a business model right now. I'm only valuable if there's a product and there's like somebody who wants to buy it. So I would get rid of me. And so I ended up leaving, and I just did consulting on the side to try to figure out what I was going to do next. But at that point, I was basically like, I'm going to go all in on my companies. And I owned some software already that like was paying the bills. I was basically picking up consulting just to have like extra cash, and really just like, I love data. And you're telling me I get to spend other people's money and like learn through their money, like about what's going on and what works all day long. I'll do that. So, did that for a while, and then we started building. So my co-founder in Swell and Drafthorse, his name's Max Chahab. We met at Rupa actually, and so we had been building products on the side just like for fun, like because that's naturally what everybody does when you're in this world. And so in July of last year, July 2020, I was doing some work for a client, and a podcast was like something that made sense for them. So we spun that up. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like writing show notes is absolutely terrible, and nobody wants to do it. And so basically we like spun up this, product. And that was kind of the origin of all of this, of like building these types of the tools that we are right now. And anyways, I can talk about that or go into that direction.
Yeah, we can talk about that, because back then ChatGPT wasn't necessarily
No, it's December of
around.
2022 was when it dropped. And we built the web application September. The first version of the product, you'll love this. It was like Google Drive folder, and like we had friends upload MP3s to it, and then we would download them and like run them locally, like on our machines. And then we'd upload the outputs, like the content that it wrote, like for them back, 30 minutes later. And I would personally email them. And we got to like, I think a 200 MRR like that in like 2 weeks, because it was other founders I knew that had podcasts for their companies. And so we're like, cool, market validation, let's build this thing. And I mean, it was so slow growth in the beginning, Brandon. Like it was just like a trickle, but looking back at it, it's so funny. And then December hit, ChatGPT like went everywhere, and the zeitgeist happened where everybody was like, how do I do this, right? Like, how do I automate this process that I'm doing currently? And so we were positioned incredibly well. January just goes like, whoop, just absolutely insane. Max ends up quitting Rupa. I think it was like April or May, and it went all in. He still had his like his day job. Like it was this was like a side project thing that we had spun out. And he was doing like, outside of working hours, like doing this thing.
How are people finding the
Yeah.
well at that time?
So initially, the whole strategy. So I basically scraped all of the podcasters' emails, and then I did a customer match list in Facebook. And how we got our first customers was doing that process. With these like kind of dirty lists like this, you can typically get a match rate of like 40 to 50%. So say you have 10,000 people, you can get 4,000 to 5,000 people that you can basically serve ads in front of. So we got kind of our initial customers like that. We ended up getting introduced to some podcasters that had newsletters in this space. So we sponsored those newsletters. And then immediately after that, I opened up Google Ads as a channel. And now that's like, I mean, it's cranky. Like it's like, I haven't even talked about the data.
Were the Facebook ads basically just, hey, here's how to automate your show notes?
It was
shoot them to a landing
demo
page?
of me, like a screen recording demo of me being like, hey, I'm Cody. I'm the co-founder of Swell. Swell is an AI writer for podcasters. It automates writing show notes, articles, and social posts. Let me show you how it works. And then it was just like straight up a demo. And we'd get watch time on it. The video was like a minute long, and I think our consumption rate was like 54% or something, like crazy. And so I was like, okay, so like there's definitely an interest for it. And it was wild though. Like, so the product actually got cloned. Like, we shared it with an agency and they built an internal tool and then launched it. Like, I didn't hear back from them. It was a month and a half later. It was a whole thing. I was so pissed. I read the Count of Monte Cristo for
can you
like,
comment, like, one of the things that all entrepreneurs, we're all scared that someone's going to take our idea, but if you don't put the idea out there, the customers can't buy it. So
for
how
me, it was an instant market validation. It pissed me off because I'd like made this person a lot of money. Like, I'd sent them clients. Yeah, I won't get into it in this setting, but
Sure.
that's probably like a closed door conversation. But long story short, for me, it was like, oh, like, of course there's value. They just built it. So that was like, that was signal. That was like, okay, cool. We're going in on this. Because we built, just like you said, like, I built 20 things. 2 of them have worked, right? Like,
Right.
it's the same thing. Like, Max and I have built 20 products and 2 of them have worked. Like, 2,
That's still actually a really good ratio.
Totally. 1 out of 10, I'll take it. And so I think for us, how I always approach it is like, if it doesn't matter how good it is if nobody's using it, and nobody can use it unless they see it. So you have to have it everywhere. And I also want to be everywhere. And it tells a great story too. It's like, cool, I got my shit cloned. Hell yeah. Like, I get to have those conversations. And every entrepreneur has also had that happen. Like, it's like an immediate, like, everybody I know that has been doing this long enough, they're like, yes, I've been burned by a partner, or I've like showed this to a company that I thought was trying to buy it, and they ended up building it after they look at my code base, or whatever. Like, they all have this story. And so I almost look at it as a rite of passage. I'm like, yeah, okay. It's like,
Well, it's going to happen. I had it happen. I hate to harp on that fishing company, but that fishing company, once people figured out, I was one of the 3 original fishing sites on the commercial internet. This is 1996, so I think I get to say that. But whatchamacallit, we had several companies raise $14 million back then, and everyone was saying, you're dead. Now, we had raised some money too, and I think we raised a total of 3, but my philosophy at the end was last man standing wins, and we're still in an execution battle because the customer doesn't care how much money you have in general.
100%.
In general, like, at some level, maybe if you're in some niche medical company or drug company, they're going to say, like, are you funded? So if I know I start buying this, you're going to be around. But if you're in B2C customer, like we're talking, even small SMB, B2B, they're not asking those questions. They just want to know, do you solve the problem and does it look legit?
Are you saving me time? Are you saving me money? Are you making me look cool in my community? Those are the only benefits that exist. Like, that is what you're selling. You're selling a version of that in every product that you sell. Like, it's been like that for 100+ years. Like, it's not going to change. It's not going anywhere. I love what you said though of last man standing. This is actually how I believe. Like, this is my view on businesses. It's not survival of the fittest. It's just like, it's like, who can breathe the longest. Like, that's all this comes down to. And I actually relate this. I always talk about this, like, related to like Darwinism. Like, Darwinism is not actually like, oh, it's the last one that survives. It's not the last one that survives. It's everybody else is dead.
No, that's it. Yeah.
And that's what business really is. Is like, I always joke, I'm like, oh yeah, no, we're a cockroach, right? Like, we're self-funded with all of our companies. And like, I don't care. Like, if there's a moment where it's like, okay, cool. If we see a path where it's like, we have to raise funding to get big fast, like, absolutely. Well, we're not, anti-VC or any of that. Like, my view is like, if you can't see a path to a billy, why are you raising? Unless you need capital now to pay your rent. And if you don't need capital now to pay your rent, own the thing outright. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So anyways, that's how we're approaching it and thinking about it. And it's just like, just exist long enough and shout into the void at your target customers long enough, and you will get traction,
So let me just summarize what you did with Swell. Saw an opportunity in the podcast space, which we've talked about podcasting. If you're just watching this clip, you need to watch the whole episode because Cody dropped so many pieces of gold along the way on how to build a podcast. But with that, you got an email, you scraped, or you can buy it. You don't even have to scrape it. You can scrape it, but you can buy all the people in a podcasters, because I get pitched 10 times a day. So clearly somebody's pulling from that database. And then you do a match on Facebook, you run some ads, which is a video. And I actually have seen that video and I was like, wow, that seems so 1996, but it actually works, right? Like, all this other fancy stuff doesn't.
Yeah.
you got some
I
sort of
built
prime.
fancy stuff and the CPC was shit. Like, I mean, that's what kills me on it. You know, that the only thing I found work. So I found this guy sorry, I'm going to digress for a second.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
found this guy talking about, basically they call them like teaser ads, where it's like, it gives you enough information, but you're like, I don't know I kind of know what this is, but I don't really know. And then they get that click. So we just made one of those recently, and I made it straight up in Canva, like threw it together in 45 minutes. It's just some motion graphics. You know those ads that Apple does where it's like the text, like it slides in from the right or it pops out, and it's like it's kind of that fast pace, and they put music behind it. That's all it is, right? Like that is straight up what the ad is, like in a way more lo-fi, like early stage company version. And it dropped our CPC by 50%. But
Wow.
before that, it was just like, you know, I tried everything. I tried static. And what worked the most effectively was just a demo video of me, the founder, talking about the product to this audience that it serves. So,
and then you took that success and then you moved it over, and you've moved over into Google Ads, which we won't. The doing your Google Ads, maybe we do another episode. That's like a whole other strategy, a whole nother stratosphere on the. Actually, one of the guys in our marketing masters group, he spends like $1 million a month on ads, and that's like that's a whole other thing. But now you're sort of killing it with Swell. And well, let me ask you this: when did you, in the story here, start leaning into Twitter? Because I'm actually a little surprised, I say this lovingly, that you weren't on Twitter earlier.
Yeah. So a couple things there. I didn't, my biggest fear is to
Twitter,
be famous.
X, sorry, X,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
whatever you want to call it. My biggest fear is to be famous. Like I had this, like, I had a friend where like he's a basically like couldn't go out and like get dinner, you know, like without like people. And so I'm just like, fuck, that looks like the most terrible existence ever. And so I never wanted to do anything like that. What it really came down to, and like why I started doing it, is I saw this arbitrage, and the marketer in me just like could not capitalize on it. So again, like these moments in time happen, right? And you get to you get to capitalize on those moments in time for marketing. So like for you, it was like email in the early days, 96. Right now, they're like, so in January of this year, I saw that Twitter was having a moment. Like I was seeing these accounts and having friends reach out to me and be like, yo, I'm getting impressions here, which I had never seen before. Like, and it felt like Facebook 2012, right? Where it's like I had a Facebook page and I would get, 30 million impressions with no ad spend. I mean, it was crazy. We were like, I have friends that were doing like, they were just drop shipping like shit, like from that whole process. So I was like, okay, cool. Like it feels like something's here. So let's break down Twitter to its core and its essence. So I was like, okay, they're starting to do this like for you promotion, just like everybody else. All of the content, like Twitter at its core, like what it wants to be is the most essenced version of the idea. So I was like, let's just break down these ideas that I'm like talking about or like going through right now on the business side. And I knew that audience is there, right? Like tech Twitter and money Twitter have been there from day one. So I knew that this would be receptive. And everybody was doing fucking like threads. And I was like, okay, cool. Don't do threads and do volume. And I bet there's going to be like this feeling that they're like, oh, thank God, not another thread boy that's like going into like this like detail. It's not what the platform is for.
I like that. Thread boy.
And so anyway, so that was the whole idea. I was like, cool, I'm going to test it for 2 weeks. Let's see what the impression volume is. And so I did that. And then I did basically like, expanded like how much, like what the average impression per day I was getting. And I was like, oh my God, I can get 100,000 impressions on this freaking site month one doing this. Right. And so I was like, all right, cool. Like validated. I know like this is something that like, I know owned media is the future, especially owned media that the founders own. Because like right now I can go start a company and tomorrow I have an audience that wants to buy that product if it serves them. And that's how I'm viewing it. It's just like, it's a hedge against everything going wrong. Right. So anyway, fast forward, I started out, I think I had 400 followers. We're at 8,000 now. I think in the last 28 days, I've done 2.2 million impressions on Twitter. I pay $5 a month for Twitter Blue. That is the cheapest CPM that exists on the internet right now. Why wouldn't you be doing this? So
I did it.
Yeah.
I saw what you saw, Cody, when Elon got a hold of that. Forget the political stuff.
Always.
Yeah, like
try to separate all that. It's just like, what is the data saying?
Do not care. And I do want to make a comment as a marketer. I'll be interested in your take. Everybody who craps on Elon Musk, who says he should have never bought Twitter, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you people don't quite understand that he built a car company with no advertising, and it's worth more than all the car companies put together. And now he just bought his marketing channel for anything he wants. Like, I don't know, 44 billion. Yeah, it sounds expensive.
You know what billionaires used to do? They used to buy periodicals like Wall Street
and
Journal.
That's what I said. Who owns the Washington Post?
Yeah, but guess what the future is?
Bezos.
It's owning. Yeah, exactly. And like, what is the future? Oh, you own a social media channel to put whatever you want on the rails. Like, it's just owned media at scale. This bullshit I'm talking about with 2.2 million impressions, scale that up. And that is a version of what's happening. And again, I'm removing all the political stuff from this.
No,
I don't
right.
care.
Yeah, I don't
like,
care.
It's just the data. It's just the data. What is it? What is working? And I think that like personally, again, I just try to approach that from a market. Like, that is my marketing view. Like, I don't care. I am platform agnostic. I don't care what works. If it's working, I do more of that. And what isn't working, I do less of it. It's the same strategy applied everywhere. Overcomplicating it and trying to get down to just get down to the essence of the idea. That is what it is. And then just do that consistently. If you do that, you'll win again.
And
like,
you're picking up a lot of users. I mean, 400 to 8,000, and that happened.
Yeah, I think we're adding like 100 followers per day right now. It's the average for the trailing last 28 days.
Wow.
So, and it's just, I'm not, this is organic. I'm not doing ads and stuff. I'm straight up just, Brandon, I don't want to be there. Like, I'm shit posting, it's like half of it is just, again, me at some, some way down in a whiskey glass. So,
but, so you do that to start building your audience. Are you at all, what we've talked about along your journey is the email list, which people right now, I like we're going through another phase because I think the Beehive came on board and now they're fighting with ConvertKit. And I find it interesting, and then Substack. And I find it interesting. Like, by the way, folks, email lists have been a thing for over 20 years. I'm glad you guys.
It all goes in waves.
I'm glad you guys figured it out. Like, awesome. But they think about email lists different than I think you and I do. And I think about, I do have this core email list, but how they think about building it is actually a little different, because I, going back to my early days, tend to want to one-to-one. Now you can automate that and customize it. Emails to basically deliver value. And then in my pipeline, I'm delivering value in my one-to-one emails, automated, however you want to do it. There's some, maybe you can comment. I'm having a very bad experience with one of these one-to-one emails that companies that starts with an M, and I want to switch to another one. So I actually asked you and Michael this question, I think a few weeks ago, which I should switch to, but I then take those individual emails and then I move them over into my email list. I've already scrubbed the people who either bounce for whatever reason and or don't want to hear from me because I delivered them value, which sometimes does happen. You can't, it's like not your feelings hurt, right? Usually people are pretty nice, to be candid, if you're delivering real value. And now I've got an organic list. So now I'm back on the Ferris wheel, because I want to get to 100, 200,000 email list, because if you get to 100,000 email list with a 40% open rate, you can launch anything. I mean, the people in the space who I know, and like I would say they're colleagues, and some of them help me, is like Pat Flynn, right? He has an email list that's over 100. Amy Porterfield, who does courses, is a master at it. I don't know if you follow them. They're sort of in a little different space because they're in courses and things like that. But these people have these email lists that, you can launch a new product. They know you reduce the risk. Is that how are you doing that with your email list the same way?
Yeah. So we actually Drafthorse was spun out of Swell. So we the first version of it, and I can talk about. So
we can talk about that. That came from a conversation I think you and me on one night, didn't it?
I mean, you were talking about article spinning, and so I built like let's just go there. It'll be the easiest way to explain it.
Because I remember sending you the message. I was like, hey, why don't you just do this because my spinner's dead? And you said, yeah, I'm going to have it in 2 weeks. And I was like, knowing Cody, he actually might. So I'm going to stand by on this one before I get another spinner. But anyway, yes.
it was
Can you talk about spinning? You're familiar with spinning articles, just
yeah, of
for
course.
people who aren't, because
Yeah.
I have like 17 blogs that have had spun articles for 10 years and have thousands. And it's not perfect, but at scale it can work. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, 100%. So Drafthorse is an AI SEO engine, is what we're starting to describe it as. So basically, our long-term vision is like, can I plug in my blog or my company's website, and does the traffic just grow? And we think we can do that just based off of the technology that exists. And so we're exploring that idea and trying to build that. Drafthorse, we spun it out of Swell AI. So I was doing this for Swell initially. So I built this basically an AI writer that was writing programmatic SEO content for Swell AI. So if we could like grow our organic traffic. And I started talking about it in public on Twitter, and people were like, "Oh, this is really interesting." And first off, it started out as that's bullshit. It'll never rank. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like here's this blog I own that is entirely AI written content, zero human editing. And the graph is just up and to the right. It's just, I just sent a search console like screenshot of it. People were like, well, the read time is probably shit. And I'm like, cool, the read time is 10 plus minutes. So you tell me, like, I don't want to believe this. Like, I've been in SEO for 10 years. Like, I don't want to believe this, but it is working. And all the data is that. And again, I'm a disciple of the data. I just follow it around. And so seeing that, I was like, this is insane. This is a massive moment right now. So I was talking about it in public. People were like, oh, I want this. How do I get this? So I shared this. It was like a Python script I wrote, like that's the first version of this. So I shared it with some friends. I showed them how to use it. I made a Loom video. They give me data back a month later and they're like, yo, we just wrote like 2,000 articles. 500 of them are indexed already. They're already getting traffic. We're on page 1 for some of this stuff. And these are people that like own niche sites that have age domains, all of this thing. So again, I just see the signal. I'm like, okay. So we spin out this web app. It goes viral on Twitter immediately after launch. We did like 5,000 signups, I think, in the first 30 days.
5,000? I didn't know it was that
5,000.
big. Wow.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, everything was breaking, right? Like, I was just like, oh shit. And we're running this other company, right? Like, I'm still growing Swell. And like, I talk about this, right? I'm talking about like Drafthorse a lot in public right now because we're trying to still figure out the market. Like our churn is insane. It's like 24% because like people are coming in right now. Basically for the listener, like how Drafthorse works is I have a list of target keywords. So say I have 100 keywords that I'm trying to write an article about. I drop each of those keywords into Drafthorse, and 3 minutes later, I have 100 articles that are written that are 2,000 plus words targeting that exact keyword phrase. So like I just did this for drafthorse.com. Like we wrote all these articles about Webflow. So imagine like, Webflow versus blah, 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 Webflow versus ABC, etc. We published these, and in the first 7 days, we're on page 1 for like 8 of the keyword phrases that we're going after. Like it's insane. This arbitrage. I mean, at this point, I've talked to fine art shippers. I've talked to insurance brokers. I've talked to like crematoriums. I've talked to like every type of company that is, and they're all looking for this type of solution. So I'm afraid, I mean, and you're seeing this already, like SEO agencies are just like going under. Like last week, it was like this company basically just, they're like, yo, our revenues have dropped by 70% in 2023. Like we just can't sustain. And so I also know some other stuff about some of these AI powered SEO agencies where they're coming from it, like from an AI perspective to begin with, crushing it because they're augmenting what use and the unit economics are this, right? Like if I wanted to write 1,000 articles that were like original before, I would go spend, we'll say $100 and I'd get an okay piece of content. So I'm going to spend $100,000 to write those 1,000 articles. I can write those 1,000 articles right now in Drafthorse for $500, and they're going to be on my website live within the hour. Like, of course, like that is the paradigm shift that we're talking about. And we're also just like, I'm over here, I'm spinning up like 300 niche sites right now because I'm like, there's all of these long tail keyword phrases that are related. Like I started this one, it's like how to start XYZ business, right? So like how to start a poly mailer business, how to start a handmade clothes business, how to start. There's thousands of these keywords that currently there isn't a good answer for. If you just write a piece of content, it's going to rank. And we're seeing that happen. We're seeing us do that. We're seeing users do that. We're seeing like degenerate marketers just throw these things up because they're just curious to see it work. So anyways, that's like kind of the origin of all this. So related to the article spinner piece, like previously used to article spin and do that rephrasing because that was the cost effective way to do this. But now there's this moment where it's like, oh, I can get a whole of this content written. Like again, I'm doing this after this call today. I'm writing 3,000 articles, one like 1,000 about marketing for CodySchneider.com, which I just use for like test data. I'm writing 1,000 for Swell AI, which is going to be about podcasting. And I'm writing 1,000 for Drafthorse, and it's going to be about WordPress, like questions about WordPress, because that's one of the CMSs that we integrate with. All of those are going to be written within an hour. All of those will be live on the site within an hour. And what we're building like long term is basically like with Drafthorse, again, we think it can be this AI SEO engine. Like I want you to plug your website in. We go and we scrape your homepage. It finds all the relevant keywords to your brand. It goes finds the low KD keywords that are related to your brand. It writes the articles that are related to your brand on these low KD keywords. It publishes them to your website. It ingests your Search Console data. It looks at the articles that it wrote. It then optimizes those articles based off the data you get back. It does auto indexing. It does auto internal linking. This is all the things that we're building. The first version of this is like straight up. It's like it's a bulk article generator. Like that's what it does currently. It writes all your articles. You can you can just like with one click publish them as drafts into your blogs. That's what we launched with. Where this is headed, and so we just introduced this Search Console. We're calling it content refreshing. So like it ingests your Search Console data. It's like, hey, here's this keyword you're getting a ton of impressions for, but you're getting no clicks for. Here's the related article. Is that keyword on the page? And we have like a no, yes checkbox thing. It like shows you, oh, no, it's not on the page. Cool. Do you want to refresh that content? I click, I have like a check boxes on the side. I click the ones I want to refresh. I click refresh and it refreshes those articles. It rewrites those articles so that it optimizes for that keyword. It adds those in so that you can get that traffic that Google wants you to get. So anyways,
yeah, that's super.
I'm freaking out,
It is amazing. It's a next generation spinner because I've been spinning these articles for years. And I was worried. I remember you posting those screenshots where it was going up and up and up. And I've been testing and testing and testing. We're actually about to, I run my own AWS instance of WordPress so that I can spin up WordPress sites in a second.
Totally.
And
it's the way to do it if you're getting at scale. Like
basically going to unleash Drafthorse on our current niches that we have and just supplement. I'll tell you what we are doing. That we're about to launch one, and I don't know if we're going to run Drafthorse today or we're going to run it next week, but we did write some of them by hand. And mainly I did that just from my old days. I mean, I am old school. So some people listening, even you, Cody, would be like, hey, Brendan, you're crazy. But I write my home pages in flat HTML. I do not use database-driven sites because I found that they SEO way better. They're a total pain in the butt, but the time you spend outweighs for me the way in our approach what the return we get, because you wind up in that first page in the top. I mean, I got it in the top for a 3-word phrase that I should have never gotten into.
100%.
Like, right? Didn't really. I mean, I earned it, but I really didn't earn it.
But this is the thing, like do what works, right? Like there's a million ways to do this right too. I always laugh at this. It's there's a million ways to get to the same place. Like it doesn't matter how you get there. That's what always drove me crazy about religion. It's like we're all trying to get enlightenment, but you're telling me that this path is wrong and this one's right. Like that's crazy. Like they're trying to get to the same zone. So, anyways, I just think about that in the same mark.
They all need money, Cody.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, all you got to do is look at incentives. But so you basically now with Draft, and can you rewind back just for a second, because you said that the tweet went viral on Twitter. Do you think that virality is repeatable and predictable after all these years that you've been in the business and you've had these things go viral? I mean, can you manufacture it?
No, I think you can create an environment where it's more likely to happen, but I don't think that you can make things go viral. I think that I always think the analogy I use is like, it's like a petri dish, right? Like I'm trying to grow some cells. There's an environment that these cells will grow more effectively in. You can make that environment, but you can't ever get the cells to actually grow. You can only influence the aspects around them. So like, let's apply that to marketing. I think it's the same thing. Like, I think we were, I had been hyping this whole idea for like 2 weeks, right? So I'm coming off of this high, right? Talking about this in public. And at that moment, like how I presented it, the initial version of it, I was like, we were supposed to launch this next Monday. It was like a Friday or Thursday, right? But I knew like it's a weekend's coming and everybody's online on a weekend. Everybody that's like doing anything, they're on Twitter, just like, doom scrolling and laughing, right? That's what it ends up being. So I'm like, we're supposed to launch this next Monday. We're pushing it today, and here it is. And it was a demo literally of the product. And in the first, that weekend, it's like everything broke. Like we didn't have API keys to handle the volume, like we had to do load balancing across 3 different API, it ended up being 4 different API keys. And so we're like, Max, everything's on fire. I'm trying to handle customer service, like all of these things. Right. And that's how the last like 40 days of my life have just been, I can feel the paychecks, like, like it's just insane. It's just, so anyways, I don't think that it can be manufactured. I think that I think the other part of virality is that it's actually tension buildup over time that's being released. So I do some work in the music industry out of Nashville, specifically in the country music industry. Like right now, it's my childhood friend. That's how I got into this. We grew up together. We're like drinking buddies. Like that's like, I care about him a lot. So he was like 3 years ago, he's like, you know what? I think I want to do this music thing. He was going to go like do like wealth management or something. And so he's like, I think I'm going to do this music thing. And I was like, oh, like, here's how I would do it if you would do it, right? Like here is how I would think about it. And so he just kind of started, he started getting his feet wet in it and like it was going. And then we looked at the unit economics of it and I'm like, this is a digital business. Like everything looks and acts and feels like a digital business. Like he owns his like he owned his catalog and we would spend ad dollars. Like we would spend $1 and we'd get $3 back in streaming revenue, like 90 days later. And so then it was just like, oh my God, this is the exact same game. So what I ended up having him do is I had him go and he would go to a studio and we'd get like neon in the background and have him drinking beers and like, he'd play his songs and we would record all those and we chop them up into social. And then I would literally do Instagram only ads and I made them feel like they were native. So the person was discovering this song. And then I had a call to action in the ad in the description that was follow XYZ artist for more content like this. So 3 things happened from that. We saw that we were getting hundreds of thousands of impressions for like nothing a month. We're spending like $1,000 a month. That was turning into $3,000 in streaming revenue 90 days later. And we were also gaining followers at 30 cents a follower to his Instagram account. Fast forward 3 years, he's now signed to Sony Nashville. Like he's about to go on tour with like one of the biggest like music artists or country. He's about to go on the tour with the biggest music or country music artists in the world right now next year. And this is like that's what it's all the same, right? Like all of this is the exact same thing. So anyway,
so you've talked a lot about a recurring theme is impressions. And I think sometimes people think, well, if I don't get the click through or I don't get, whether it was podcasts we talked about earlier, in this case, a follow or even a Spotify follow, that it's not worth something. But it sounds like in your mind, and you talk about this on Twitter, you sometimes, I don't know, once a week or twice a week, you'll say, oh, I just got X amount of impressions for $5. We talked about it earlier in the episode. So impressions for you and maybe video ads, you're getting impressions even though you're not paying for the ads. So it's almost like it's worth more in your mind, it sounds like.
You're telling me that we're paying 0.005 cents for somebody to listen to a song for the first time. Like I couldn't do that on radio. I couldn't get that price ever anywhere else. So of course, like I'm just looking for where is the cheapest place that I can get the thing I want to happen, which is an introduction to this type of music. And like to get back to the virality piece of this all. So for him, right, he goes in spikes. There's these moments where he just will like rise in his, like, basically it's his monthly listeners. That's the number that everybody's looking at. So like his monthly listeners, it'll be flatlined, right? And that will go on for 90 days. And I tell him, like, he'll call me and this happens every time. And every time we do the same process, I'm like, I call them bleeding moments. I think growth happens in growth spurts. This is my view. And during those growth spurts, you have bleeding moments where you're just like, you feel like you're bleeding out. Everything sucks. You're not on the high of the dopamine hit of it going up and to the right. If you zoom out, everything looks great, right? But in that moment, in that bleeding period, you're just having to suffer and you just like survive until the next growth spurt. And so that's actually how I think virality happens. If you like how you can consistently make virality. You show up, you do the work, day after day, and then one day a thing pops and you kind of know why, but you don't actually know why. You have like a general idea of it. And that's how you actually like craft virality. So when I look at apply this to Twitter now, right? Every 100 tweet or so, something will pop off where it just gets way more impressions than all the other tweets. I don't really know why. I can kind of see a theme. Like here's different, trends within that. But a lot of the times, if I try to do that same thing, but I remix it, it's the same idea, but it's remixed in a new way. It doesn't pop in the same way. And that really comes down to it was in the right place at the right time with the right idea, with the right audience that engaged with it initially. And all of those things you can't craft. But if you get if you're a decent hitter and you go at bat enough, you're going to get those, you're going to crank those homers. And that's how I think about all of this, marketing. And when it comes to the virality piece and all of it, how that all relates to each other.
Well, I think it's actually a hack that people don't realize is if you do the videos and you get the impressions, they don't charge you for the impression unless you're paying on per impression, which you're probably going to choose pay per click or just click through rate, right? In general is what you're choosing.
We do engagement only ads. So to grow him, we did engagement only, Instagram only, video ads. And the engagement we're going for is them clicking to his profile. Since I have that call to action to go to his profile in that, again, I'm getting 0.005 cents engagements. So that means that I'm paying 0.005 cents to get them to his profile. And then a percentage of them go and follow his account, which means that over the long term, they always turn into they call them lean forward fans. That's what everybody's trying to make. It's the people that are at a concert and they're playing your favorite song and they lean forward, right? They get closer towards the stage as time goes on. That's what the industry calls them. And so that's what we're trying to generate. That's what we're trying to do. The unit economics of that business are fucking insane, Brandon. You make it's better than software.
But you do have to make a good song.
Of
right?
course. Yeah. I'm talking good, you're a good, but there's how many good musicians do we know, right?
A lot. Yeah.
There's a ton of them, but none of them, all of them also think this is selling out. I think that's the funniest shit in the world to me. They're oh, that's I'm dude, this is how you do it. If you want to do it,
pay your mortgage or you want to do something else.
Just to give context, he was independent doing $300K a year off of streaming revenue.
That's a lot of money
for an individual and his type of audience. He doesn't have a band. It's him, also country music artist. I mean, we're all still listening to Merle Haggard. So he has longevity for the rest of his life. It's insane. People don't talk about this. They look at, they're oh, streaming revenues are super low. It's dude, that's because they own 80% of your catalog. Of course it's low. For an average person though, you can make great money with not a ton of people listening to you. In the whole, I think about it for him. He's about to hit 1 million monthly listeners, right? That is 1/300th or whatever of the US population. That number isn't crazy, but he's making great money doing this in a way because we just approached it from basic principles. It just, and again, this looked and felt like an internet company. I was oh, all of the unit economics, it feels like a niche site. It feels like software. It feels like a digital product. If all of those things align. So I'm okay, well, what works in these other spaces for those types of products? Ads work. Let's just try ads and see what happens. So anyway.
We've talked a lot about Twitter because I guess you call it the essence of the idea and sort of getting that essence. And it seems to have more engagement. I mean, there's one-to-one, you can have conversations. You've talked a little bit about Instagram on the music stuff. You're using Google Ads for Swell or Drafthorse, I forget, or maybe both. What do you think about LinkedIn? I mean, Instagram you're using for music. Do all of these things to B2B is better at Twitter right now? LinkedIn is hard for me to understand a little bit because people say they have success. I get spammed all day long. Maybe it's a numbers game. I don't hang out on LinkedIn in general. Maybe hardcore business people do. It's very hard for me to say. Do you have like, can we go
Yeah,
across the
yeah. So
spectrum? And we didn't talk about YouTube either.
yeah, yeah. So for how I think about LinkedIn is like people are on LinkedIn because they want to project the job that they're trying to get. So if you can get them something that makes them look like they are like gets them promoted, like then you're gonna get reach. And that's the only way I've seen LinkedIn work. There's other people that have like totally different views. I mean, I think more and more people are actually spending time on LinkedIn. All the data is showing that, like just their user, like just their impression data, everything. The problem with LinkedIn is that it's you have to either go all in or not at all, right? And so it's like that's the only way I've seen it done really well. And it for me again, I am in an early stage startup right now that's building Martech. Like it helps marketers. Like I have found marketers are way more receptive on Twitter than they are on LinkedIn. Like and just from a growth and like all of that. With that said, you can growth hack LinkedIn. So the best way to do it if you're trying to grow your LinkedIn, there's a gray hat solution. So you basically go and you find these influencers that are in your space. So again, say you're in the marketing world, you go find influencers that are talking about marketing related like stuff, and they get hundreds of engagements on their posts. Okay, you want to go follow and connect with every person that engaged with that post. Why? Because they are actually on the platform doing an action that LinkedIn values as being a signal that this is a good piece of content. So if they're actually clicking that, they engage. So like you could do this same thing where you go and you connect with a ton of people, but if you connect with a ton of people that aren't active on the platform, you're doing nothing to yourself. So you connect with all these people that are engaging with this other content, and then you publish content on a daily basis. You only have to do weekdays. The impression data on posts on LinkedIn is like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday comes, it's down to 10% of what it typically is. Sunday, same thing, jumps back up on Monday morning. So if you do those two things, like you can grow LinkedIn's. I personally have seen more impact just for us from Twitter. So that's why like more time is spent there. I'm also just like, it feels like I'm breaking the laws of physics right now on Twitter. Like I just did a retro analysis of like the last 90 days of growth, and month over month, it's like basically growing at a rate that if it keeps on that track by December, I'll have like 50,000 followers, and I'm at like 8,000 right now, which again, I don't even believe this, but like I'm looking at the data and it's saying this, and I'm like, okay, cool. Well, like I want to see if the data is real. Like, so let's actually do this. But if it does that, right? So like just to give you context and scale. So if I have 50,000 followers, and we'll just say that the average impression stays about the same. So I'm getting 2 million with 8,000. So that's whatever that is, 50,000 divided by 8,000. So that's 6.25 times 2.2 million. So I'm going to get 13.75 million impressions per month on Twitter in December. That is like the projected number if it continues to grow at the rate that it is. So how I'm thinking about it in my mind is like, you're telling me that I can get, like I have to work on this. Like I have to do this thing that I've been doing for 6 months, for 6 more months, and I'm going to get 13 million impressions for $5 a month. Of course I'm going to do this. Like, of course. So I don't see that same arbitrage on LinkedIn. I think it actually existed probably 2 years ago, but I think that moment has passed, at least for me. So Twitter is having its moment. Here's this vehicle. Cool. Get behind the wheel and just pedal down
And you're going to
delay.
get paid because they just
It's
lowered the
crazy.
5 million impressions, right? You're going to get
It's
paid
crazy.
for Twitter.
It's crazy. So, I mean,
What
which
about
is,
YouTube?
yeah, YouTube. I'm not as much of an expert in YouTube. Honestly, who you should talk to if you want to talk to somebody who knows YouTube really well is my friend named Cody Conrad. He's at Rupa still, but he just cracked YouTube. I just saw their data. It's absolutely ridiculous. So
Well, we'll
what
have
he
to have
did,
him
his
on the show.
tactical strategy, what his tactical strategy for it was, they had a ton of back catalog of these long format YouTube videos. It's like educational content, and he ended up finding which the most viral one of those videos. He put ad spend behind it because he read in this like black hat forum that how YouTube does, or how YouTube's like propagation algorithm works is that if you've watched a video enough, you start to get served more content from that channel. And then if you watch that, like another video from that channel, it basically creates this like flywheel effect. So he showed me this data like last week, and it was basically like, and he's doing this like with personal stuff. Basically, this is how we're all testing, right? Like I talk about, I'm publishing 1,000 articles at CodySchneider.com because that's what I like. I need a test bed for all of these beliefs that I have, and this is the ways to do that. And if it gets nuked, whatever, you know. But if it works, then we go and we take that to the companies that we're working with or working on. So, anyways, he turns these ads on, and the keywords he's targeting are related to the video that he is putting as an ad. But this video is like 40 minutes long, right? So he's basically, imagine they search XYZ keyword. The video is about XYZ. It shows that video and the person watches like 2 minutes of it or 5 minutes of it. They don't even realize it's an ad. They think it's the video, right? I'm talking 60 days later. You go back to every video, every like views, every video that's in their back catalog, and the graph looks like this. And it's like, what's the only thing that happened? They started running ads. So people started watching the videos and getting their profile in front of more people. And what that did is it lifted the entire back catalog. I mean, it looks fake, honestly. I saw the data and I was like, this looks absolutely fake. And it's insane. Like it's again, one of these arbitrages where I'm over here and I'm like, fuck, like I got to get on YouTube. I'm going to start running ads to it. Because I could talk about data studio stuff all day long. I've been wanting to build like a niche about that. And it's like, okay, cool. Like maybe that's it or whatever, B2B marketing strategy or something. I don't know. But that is how I've seen people do YouTube really effectively from an organic side. On the paid ad side, I only ever really do remarketing on YouTube. There's a lot of people that have had success with like funnels, like YouTube funnels. I just haven't gotten that deep into it. My deep tea is way more in like Facebook, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, SEO, and like organic social. Like those are the places where I have more knowledge. But I know of people that have done really good on the YouTube side. But that organic play, I've never seen anything like it. Again, it's just like you're talking like slope going from just like this kind of steady climb to like, again, ads go on and it just goes every video in their back catalog goes vertical because it just starts showing all of the videos that are in that accounts. Like it just starts showing those within the related videos is basically what he surmised and what the data shows. So
it makes sense though. And I used to experiment a lot with that with Google ads. And I actually used Google back in the day. Google's changed, obviously, and it changes regularly. But back in the day, if you spent money on Google ads, I could watch my SEO traffic go up. And
100%.
I can't say that they were juicing my thing or not, but there was definitely something that happened not unsimilar to what I think was happening. Is that algorithm is working like YouTube. It's seeing the click, and then when the person
looking at engagement, right? It's probably just looking at, like, I'm thinking about the website. It's like, it's looking at that engagement signal. Like, are they scrolling and reading the content related to that keyword? Like, exactly. Yes, they are. And so then it's like, okay, let's serve that because we think it's a good piece of content. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
100%.
all the keywords basically just moved up to the top, and I owned all the keywords. And before I know it, I'm getting over $500,000. And it was like, this thing's just printing money. I mean, I hate to say that, but it was printing money because when you're getting free traffic in a media business, the margins are really high. And we had actually a subscription, which people like are all about subscriptions now. I had a subscription back I think we started that subscription in 2001, and we would convert. It was a little bit, I think we converted 9%. Don't quote me because it was a while ago, but it was 9%. And the other thing in that social network, Cody, is I hand screened we had 175,000 registered people in addition to all the traffic. I hand screened every one of them because I wouldn't allow a public email unless they validated it to me personally, because I realized that when I had it opened up, I had so much spam that I was spending more time cleaning the forums than I was so I would just go through, and every single person that ever went through there, I validated manually.
Amazing.
And people say, well, that's not scalable. Well, I'm recording from a studio here at Half Moon Bay that on a house that overlooks the ocean. So you can tell me whatever you want, but like you, Cody, I just go by the data. The data
Exactly.
got me the exit in the house. So
That's the thing that kills me. It's like you can't fight with it. You can't argue with it, Like, and it's like that's why I hate creative work, and this is for that reason. It's you can have an opinion. Like with data, it's like it's either like the data says a thing. Like you can interpret that story also in different ways. Like I will say that. But like especially in marketing, it's like, cool, I'm getting signups for this price. Are they buying the software? Yes. Okay. What's my payback period? X. Okay. Like you can't argue that. Like that's a very hard thing to be like, no, that's not right. Like, and I think that's a thing that people force a lot. Like we talk about product market fit, but we never talk about like product market channel fit. So it's like every product has channels that are good for it. Like Drafthorse, Twitter is a good channel for it from organic. And I'm trying to open up another channel, right? Like I'm doing cold email and Google ads and Facebook ads right now. And we're still super early, so we don't know like where it's going to go. But um, you can't force a product on a channel. It's either good for that channel or not. And that is something that I think like that was when I had that realization, like from a marketer's just view, like everything changed in that moment. It's like, okay, like I have this product, like I can't force it here, but is there a way that I can finagle it in? Like, can I make it feel like it's supposed to be there? Can I make it feel like it's native? And that's the difference. Like in the past, it used to be just brute force. We would do marketing, right? But now it's like, it's more eloquent. It has some elegance in it. It's like you're being softer with all of it, and that from what I've seen work. That's what I've seen work, and so I just again lean towards what's working. So
yeah, I'm 100% with you. I learned that early on when I worked at America Online. I think we had the first big data division of any internet company, and
it's amazing.
It was all data, Cody. Like
Yeah.
there was no opinion. You could have an opinion, but we were going to show you the data, and we were just going to do more of what the data said. Period.
Totally.
We weren't going to argue with it. And sometimes it's sort of I use the analogy. Everybody says, "Oh, Craigslist looks like a 1994 internet site." Yeah, but Craigslist prints, I don't know, what's he print, 100
I think
and
it's
some
like
million.
680 million or something. It's like it's 40 employees.
Data says different. So while you're commenting from your apartment, Craig is retired in New York, probably with a G8. Like, so I mean, that's a hard thing, like being harsh on people. But it's the point is that you really do have to follow the data. And I think you've done it.
Like if you do that long enough too, you just end up like in a place where you're like, how I don't know really how I got here. Like for me too, right? Like I started out like hawking print on demand shit on the internet, and then
Did you
that led
really?
into I was like I figured out how to data mine Etsy. This was like forever ago, and so I was like data mining Etsy and finding best selling products and then making versions of that, and like that was like the first business that I had that took off, and I like it got so big. I was like in school and I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, so I ended up dropping out and like, I went back and I did I dropped out like twice. I failed out twice because I was running these companies and I was like, this is ridiculous. Like it was just taking up my time. I was sitting in these classes. I studied business economics and I was sitting in these classes and I was just like watching money come in, sitting in this 2-hour lecture. And I'm like, what? Like, where's my attention going to go? It's like going to go to this thing that is printing internet money, like, so with that though, like fast forward, like I just tried to. People always ask like, how do you learn marketing? Like my go-to, what I always say is like, make a blog about something you think is interesting, figure out how to get traffic to it, and try to sell that traffic something. If you can do that, you're in the top 1% of marketers. So that's like the base. Through that process, you're going to gain these skill sets that are going to be so invaluable to people that you can go and sell your time. And then what that evolves into is like, if you're really good, the most marketers end up turning into founders. And that's like where they end up. It's just like the natural progression that happens because you see yourself making all this value for these companies and you're like, okay, like, maybe I own a percentage of this company if I like say it's a startup or something, right? But do I think that I can make more money in a shorter amount of period if I do my own thing? And even maybe it's a smaller amount, but is it more than my equity, what it will be if it hits, right? If the company hits. And so I had that epiphany and I was like, dude, I have to do this. I have to do like going all in on these other things. So anyway, but
Well,
we're so early in this, like, I don't know where any of it's going. All I know is that like, I'm going to just try to build products that solve problems for people. And every time I've done that, it's continues to work. And so until it stops working, I'm going to just keep doing that. So,
Well, I think that's awesome. And you do have a good partner, which you've been able to have. And I think that's what it takes. You got to have an engineer who can
100%. I mean, Max is unbelievable too. Like, it's funny. People, like, they know me, right? But like, Max built the SSO and SAML for like Work OS, right? Which powers like all enterprise logins, like for all startups right now. He was the first engineer at the company. All the code that was written around that is his code. And he's first engineer at High Touch, right? Again, huge, like, I mean, massive data company. And the same. So like, I'm out here and I'm parading around and shouting into the void. Like there. I could not do any of this without him. I would just be, I can do product somewhat. And like, I'm a script kiddie. I always joke, I was a script kiddie. Now I'm a prompt jockey, but like, I can get stuff, like I can build some stuff, but not at what scale and like the enterprise level that we're talking about that Max can. Like, he's one of the most unbelievable engineers I've ever just encountered with. Also, we're just like, I mean, we're both into action sports. That's how we really got to become friends. So he's like into mountaineering, and he just got into paragliding. And so he's actually in Europe right now doing paragliding. And just like, I have a check-in call with him, like, yo, you dead? And he's like, nah. And I'm like, cool, okay.
We're still in business.
Yeah. And so anyways, and like, I'm deep in skiing. Like, winter comes and like, that's where I'm at, right? Like, I'm just going to chase snow. And so for us, it's like, that was how we initially started. And then we had these skill sets that were complementary, and it's so much easier. Like, I think that's the one thing too. Like, I see all these people that are like, oh, I'm going to try to be the engineer and the marketer. It's so hard. They exist. They 100% exist. But like, it is 1 out of a million. Like, when you hit that, right? It is so much easier to build a core competency, like in growth or a core competency in engineering, and then combine those two skill sets together. Because if you have both, like, when I think about a lot of like, how do you break down a business? Like, what is a business at its like essence? And to me, a business is you have something to sell and you can sell it. And so like, that's how I look at, like, fast forward, like, growth is the way to sell it, and engineering is the way to like have something to sell. And so that is, basically what it takes. And so if you have those things, then you can do this. So.
Well, this has been awesome, man. I think we should wrap up because you and I probably talk for 4 more hours, and I know
Probably,
you
man.
got,
Have me back on. I'd love to come. It'd be great.
No, yeah, we're gonna do. We'll do another one and a deep dive on something.
Yeah.
But here, I'm gonna put you on the spot, and I'm gonna ask you for 3 HPTs. That's 3 high percentage tips. So, out of all the marketing you've done from all of your career, you give 3 pieces of advice to people on the show. What are those 3 pieces of advice?
Yeah, I think the 3 things that are most important to me, and we kind of probably have hit them in ways or throughout this conversation, but like, starting with like, start from brands, because that's the only thing that holds value long term. And then always look for arbitrage, and when you see it, put all of your resources there. And then, what are resources in marketing? It's time, money, and mental energy. You only have so much of each of them, and you need to think about, how am I allocating those? And depending on the size and where your company is, those resources, the distribution of those are entirely different, right? So like, an early stage company that's self-funded, you have a lot more time, little money, a lot of mental energy. A funded company that's middle stage, you don't have mental energy, you don't have time, but you have more money. And so always make your decisions off that. And I'll give an extra one too. Like, number 4 that I would think about is thinking about marketing like an investment portfolio. You have short-term things that you have to do, and then you have long-term things that you're investing in that will pay off later. So we should think about it in a personal finance sense. So like, again, just to use that analogy and take it really far, like, when I'm young, I'm investing less in my long-term portfolio than what I am in like paying my rent and buying food and those things. But as I progress and get older, I'm putting more into that long-term portfolio and less into that short-term. And I think that when we think about marketing in that way, it changes. Like, for me, it changed my mindset, where it's like, okay, especially when it's companies are 0 to 1. Like, this is what I do though, right? It's like, I take companies from 0 to 1, and then like we build teams around them, and then they go and they run themselves. But when you're taking a company from 0 to 1, you're just trying to survive. So you can't invest in long-term things, right? like it always killed me when it's like this company's like investing, like they're, for example, like it's a funded company and they're investing like millions in SEO. It's like, fuck, you don't even know if you're going to be here in 3 years, and that's when it's going to pay off. So why are you investing in that? Right now, you need transactional activities that's going to make impact immediately today. And I'm not saying all of your resources, but 80% of your resources there, 20% of your resources to the long term if you actually make it. As you progress, then that, that allocation shifts. So 80% are to long term, 20% to short term. So anyways, that's what I'll leave you with. That's how I kind of view the world and like to think about the world. So
I think that's a great tip. Cody, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, the best place is just look me up on Twitter. It's Cody Schneider XX. If you just Google Cody Schneider Twitter, it'll come up too. That's probably the easiest way. So,
man, this has been awesome. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. I can't wait to do another one, and I'm going to go back and watch your shit posting this afternoon.
Amazing. Thank you, Brandon, for having me. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
See ya.
See you, brother.